In the glittering halls of Ashford Manor, a priceless sapphire necklace vanishes under the watchful eyes of Hercule Poirot. Was it stolen by a desperate nephew, a resentful companion, or a cunning outsider? Whispers of a decades-old scandal and shadowy voices in the night hint at a deeper plot. Can Poirot's little grey cells unravel the web of lies before the thief escapes? Dive into a mystery where every glance hides a secret and every clue sparks a question. Chapter 1. The Spark of Suspicion. The autumn evening draped itself over Ashford Manor like a velvet cloak, the air crisp with the scent of damp leaves and wood smoke. The estate, nestled in the rolling hills of Kent, glowed under the golden light of chandeliers spilling through tall windows. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in his tailored evening suit, adjusted his bow tie and surveyed the scene from the gravel drive. His polished shoes crunched softly as he approached the grand entrance, where liveried footmen stood like sentinels. Lady Beatrice Ashford's invitation had been intriguing, hinting at a gathering of eclectic guests and a display of her famed sapphire necklace. The star of azure, Poirot's little grey cells, ever alert, sensed more than a mere social occasion. Inside, the grand hall shimmered with opulence. Crystal flutes clinked, and laughter rose above the soft strains of a string quartet. Lady Beatrice, a statuesque widow in her 60s, commanded the room in a gown of midnight blue, the sapphire necklace gleaming at her throat. Its central gem, a deep, starlit blue, seemed to pulse with secrets. Poirot's eyes, sharp as a falcon's, scanned the guests, a mix of aristocrats, artists, and entrepreneurs, each a thread in the tapestry of this curious evening. Mon ami, Poirot murmured to Captain Arthur Hastings, his loyal friend and occasional chronicler, who stood at his side in a slightly rumpled tuxedo. Observe the elegance, the sparkle of wealth, but beneath it there is always the undercurrent of motive. The human heart, it betrays itself in the smallest gestures. Hastings, ever earnest, nodded. Looks like a jolly crowd, though that necklace must be worth a fortune. Think someone's got their eye on it. Poirot's moustache twitched. The eye, Hastings, is always watching where treasure lies. But it is the mind, my little grey cells, that will see what the eye does not. Lady Beatrice approached, her smile gracious, but her eyes sharp. Monsieur Poirot, how delightful you could join us. I trust you'll find the company stimulating. Madame Poirot bowed, his voice smooth as polished oak. The company is a puzzle, and I am never bored by puzzles. Your necklace, it is magnifique, a rare piece, Nan. Her hand fluttered to the sapphire, fingers grazing its edges. A family heirloom passed down through generations. They say it carries a curse, but I'm not one for superstition. Her laugh was light, but Poirot noted a flicker of unease in her gaze. As the evening unfolded, Poirot mingled, his ears attuned to every word, his eyes catching every glance. There was Charles Warwick, Lady Beatrice's nephew, a charming but detraden young man whose smile seemed too eager. Miss Clara Henshaw, Lady Beatrice's companion, hovered at her employer's side, her plain dress and quiet demeanour belied a keen intelligence. A bohemian painter, Victor Duval, gesticulated wildly about art's transformative power, while Mrs. Eleanor Price, a sharp-tongued heiress, critiqued the wine with surgical precision. The waiter, a wiry man named Thomas Reed, moved with a peculiar grace, his eyes darting as if mapping the room. Dinner was announced, and the guests filed into the dining room, a cavernous space adorned with tapestries and a long mahogany table. Poirot took his seat, strategically placed to observe all. The meal was exquisite roast, pheasant, truffled potatoes, and a sorbet that melted like a dream, but Poirot's attention was elsewhere. He noted how Charles's hand trembled when he reached for his glass, how Clara's gaze lingered on the sapphire necklace, and how Victor's anecdotes grew louder with each glass of claret. Halfway through the second course, a commotion erupted. Lady Beatrice rose, her face pale as moonlight. "My necklace," she gasped, her hand clutching her bare throat. "It's gone." The room froze. Glasses paused mid-air. Forks hovered over plates. Poirot's little grey cells snapped to attention, his heart quickening not with panic but with the thrill of a challenge. "Madame," he said, rising smoothly, "remain calm. Hercule Poirot is here, and no thief escapes the net of my mind." "Hastings, ever practical," whispered Blimey Poirot, "it must have happened during dinner. Nobody left the table, did they?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Nobody left, mon ami, but the thief is clever. Observe, question, deduce this is how we begin." The guests murmured, some indignant, others nervous. Lady Beatrice, regaining her composure, insisted the room be searched. Footmen scoured under tables and behind curtains, but the necklace was nowhere to be found. Poirot, however, did not join the frenzy. He stood by the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back, his mind racing. His gaze settled on a single object on the floor, half hidden by a chair, a lady's glove, delicate and embroidered with silver thread. It was out of place, its partner missing, its owner unknown. "Interesting," Poirot murmured, bending to retrieve it. He held it to the light, noting a faint smudge of powder on the fabric. "This glove, it tells a story, but whose?" Lady Beatrice, her voice trembling, approached. "Monsieur Poirot, you must find it. That necklace is more than a jewel, it's my family's legacy." "Fear not, madame," Poirot said, his tone firm but soothing. "The thief is still among us. They have not had time to escape with their prize. My little grey cells, they are already at work." He turned to the guests, his presence commanding silence. "Mesdames et messieurs, no one shall leave this house tonight. The star of azure remains within these walls, and I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover it. Let us proceed with order and method." The guests exchanged uneasy glances, but none dared protest. Poirot's reputation preceded him, a detective whose mind was as sharp as a guillotine. As the quartet resumed playing, a soft melody to ease the tension, Poirot's thoughts churned. The glove was a clue, but not the only one, he recalled. Thomas Reed's deft movements, Charles's nervous laughter, Clara's watchful eyes. The sapphire's disappearance was no accident, it was a performance, and Poirot was determined to unmask the performer. He approached Hastings, who was eyeing the guests like a hawk. "What now, Poirot? Search their rooms." "Nan, Hastings. To search blindly is to chase shadows. We observe, we listen, we think. The glove, it is a beginning. Tomorrow, we question. Tonight, we let the thief believe they are safe, but they are not." As the guests retired to their rooms under the watchful eyes of the staff, Poirot lingered in the dining room, his fingers tracing the glove's embroidery. The sapphire necklace, he knew, was more than a jewel, it was a magnet for greed, envy, and secrets. His little grey cells hummed with anticipation, for the game had begun, and Hercule Poirot never lost. The dining room, now empty save for Poirot and Hastings, felt like a stage after the curtain's fall. The chandelier's light cast long shadows, and the air held a faint scent of lavender from Lady Beatrice's perfume. Poirot paced slowly, his steps deliberate, his mind reconstructing the evening's events. "Hastings," he said, pausing by the table, "consider the timing. The necklace was present during the first course. By the second, it was gone. Yet, no one left the room. How does a thief steal in plain sight?" Hastings frowned, scratching his chin. "Sleight of hand, perhaps. Like a magician, precisement." Poirot's eyes sparkled. But this magician required an accomplice, or a distraction. The glove, it is not merely lost it, was placed. A deliberate act, perhaps to mislead. He held the glove aloft, examining it again. The powder smudge intrigued him. It was not face powder, too coarse for that, but something else perhaps. Chalk or talc. His mind catalogued the possibilities. A gardener's glove, a servant's tool, or something more sinister. "Let us reconstruct," Poirot said, moving to Lady Beatrice's chair. She sat here, the necklace prominent, the lights dimmed slightly for the ambience. Nan. A moment of darkness, a flicker of opportunity. Hastings nodded, caught up in Poirot's rhythm. Someone could have slipped it off her neck during a toast or a laugh. But where'd they hide it? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. That, mon ami, is the question. The necklace is large, not easily concealed. Yet it is gone, poof, like a rabbit in a hat. We must find the hat. He moved to the sideboard, where the waiters had served the wine. Thomas Reed's face flashed in his mind, the waiter's eyes, too sharp to knowing. Poirot's little grey cells noted his familiarity with the room, the way he navigated the space as if he'd studied it. But suspicion alone was not enough. Poirot needed evidence, and the glove was his first thread, as the clock struck midnight. Poirot and Hastings retired to their guest rooms, but sleep was far from Poirot's mind. He sat at a small desk, sketching a mental map of the dining room, placing each guest, each movement. The glove, the powder, the necklaces weightle pieces of a puzzle. He closed his eyes, letting his little grey cells dance dot the next morning. As dawn painted the manor in soft pinks, Poirot stood at his window, gazing at the gardens below. The guests would be restless, the thief among them calculating their next move. But Poirot was ready. The glove, carefully stored in his pocket, was his talisman, a silent promise that the truth would not elude him. He turned to Hastings, who was struggling with his tie. "Today, mon ami, we begin the hunt in earnest. The thief believes they have one, but they do not know Hercule Poirot. The little grey cells, they never sleep." Hastings grinned. "I wouldn't bet against you, old chap. What's the plan?" Poirot's moustache curved upward. "We question, we observe, we provoke. The thief will betray themselves, for no one can hide from the truth forever." As they descended to breakfast, the manor buzzed with tension. The guests' faces were a gallery of emotions, fear, curiosity, defiance. Poirot's little grey cells were alight, sensing the spark of suspicion that would ignite the path to the truth. The star of azure was still within these walls, and he would find it. Chapter 2. The Art of Observation. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Ashford Manor, casting a golden glow over the breakfast room. The air was thick with unease, the clatter of silverware and murmured conversations barely masking the tension among the guests. Hercule Poirot, impeccable in a charcoal suit, sipped his tisane, his eyes darting from face to face like a painter assessing a canvas. The theft of Lady Beatrice Ashford's sapphire necklace, the star of azure. hung over the room like a storm cloud. His little grey cells, ever vigilant, were already weaving a tapestry from the threads of last night's observations. Captain Hastings, seated beside him, buttered a scone with unnecessary vigour. Poirot, the nerve of it all. Stealing right under our noses. Do you think the thief's still here, bold as brass? Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. Mon ami, the thief is not only here, but dining among us. The boldness, it is their weakness. They believe they have outwitted Poirot, but they underestimate the power of observation. The breakfast table was a study in contrasts. Lady Beatrice, regal despite her loss, presided with a tight smile. Charles Warwick, her nephew, toyed with his coffee cup, his eyes flickering nervously. Miss Clara Henshaw, the companion, cut her fruit with surgical precision, her face unreadable. Victor Duval, the painter, sketched idly on a napkin, his flamboyance subdued, and Mrs. Eleanor Price, the heiress, critiqued the eggs with a voice that carried like a whip. Thomas Reed, the waiter from the previous evening, moved silently, refilling teapots with a grace that caught Poirot's attention once more. Poirot set down his cup, his movements deliberate. "Madame et messieurs," he announced, his voice cutting through the chatter, "I require a moment of your time. The star of azure remains within this manor, and I, Hercule Poirot, will find it. But I need your cooperation. Each of you will speak with me today to clarify the events of last night." A murmur rippled through the room. Charles coughed, nearly spilling his coffee. "Surely you don't suspect us all, Monsieur Poirot," he said, his tone aiming for levity but landing on unease. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "I suspect no one, monsieur, and everyone. The truth, it hides in the details, and I am a collector of details." Lady Beatrice nodded, her voice firm. "Anything. To recover my necklace. Ask what you must, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot began his interrogations in the library, a wood-panelled sanctuary lined with leather-bound volumes and scented with old paper. He chose his first subject carefully, Thomas Reed, the waiter whose deft movements had piqued his interest. Reed entered, his posture stiff, his eyes wary but polite. "Monsieur Reed," Poirot began, settling into a high-backed chair, "you served the wine last night with remarkable skill. Tell me, how long have you worked at Ashford Manor?" Reed's hands clasped behind his back. "Only a month, sir. I was hired for the season. Lady Ashford's staff needed extra hands for the gathering." Poirot's fingers traced the armrest, his gaze never leaving Reed's face. "A month, yet you moved through the dining room as if you were born to it. You know the Manor's layout well, Nan." Reed's jaw tightened, a flicker of something defensiveness. Crossing his face, "I make it my business to know my surroundings, sir. Helps me do my job." "Been, sir," Poirot said, his tone light but probing. "And last night, during the second course, where were you when Lady Beatrice discovered her loss?" "At the sideboard, sir, preparing the dessert trays." "I didn't see anything unusual." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft as velvet. "Nothing unusual, you say? Yet a necklace vanishes in a room full of eyes. Tell me, Monsieur Reed, did you notice a glove, perhaps, near the dining table?" Reed's eyes widened, just for a moment, before he recovered. "A glove? No, sir, I was focused on my duties." Poirot smiled, dismissing him with a nod. Waiter's reaction, subtle but telling, was filed away in his mental ledger. Reed knew more than he admitted, but whether he was thief or witness remained unclear. Next, Poirot summoned Clara Henshaw. The companion entered, her plain grey dress a stark contrast to the library's richness. She sat, her hands folded, her gaze steady but guarded. "Mademoiselle Henshaw," Poirot said, "you are always at Lady Beatrice's side, Nan. You see much, yet say little. Tell me of last night, from your perspective." Clara's lips pressed into a thin line. "I was seated to Lady Beatrice's left. I noticed her necklace during the first course. It caught the light beautifully. By the second course, she gasped, and it was gone. I didn't see anyone near her." Poirot tilted his head. "You were observant, mademoiselle, yet you did not see the thief. Or perhaps you saw something else, a gesture, a glance." Her fingers twitched, betraying a hint of nerves. I did notice Mr. Warwick seemed agitated. He kept looking at his aunt, then away. But I thought it was just his usual restlessness." Poor little grey cells hummed. Clara's observation was precise, but her hesitation suggested she was holding back. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful." As Clara left, Poirot jotted a note in his small leather-bound notebook. "Clara sees more than she says. Charles's agitation motive or distraction. He moved noon. He called Charles Warwick. Charles entered, his boyish charm dimmed by dark circles under his eyes. He sprawled in the chair, attempting nonchalance. "Monsieur Poirot, I assure you, I was nowhere near Aunt Beatrice's necklace. I was enjoying the pheasant, you see." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Enjoying, perhaps, but your hands, they trembled, monsieur. And your eyes, they wandered to the necklace often. Tell me what troubles you." Charles laughed, too loudly. "Troubles? Only the usual bells, you know. Nothing to do with jewels." Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. "Bills, you say? A man in debt might see a sapphire as salvation. Nan, where were you at the precise moment the necklace vanished?" Charles's smile faltered. I stood to propose a toast, I think. Yes, just before the second course. Everyone was looking at me, not the necklace." Poirot's mind seized on the discrepancy. Charles had claimed earlier to have remained seated throughout dinner. The lie, small but deliberate, was a crack in his facade. A toast, mused, a fine distraction. "Merci, Monsieur Warwick." As Charles left, Poirot's thoughts churned. Charles's lie was clumsy, but was it the mark of a thief or a man hiding another secret? The morning progressed with more interviews. Duval, whose theatrical gestures seemed rehearsed. Mrs. Price, whose sharp tongue deflected questions with ease, but none offered as clear a lead as Reed's wariness or Charles's contradiction. Poirot retreated to the garden for a moment of reflection, the gravel paths crunching under his polished shoes. He held the embroidered glove from the dining room, its silver threads glinting in the sunlight. The powder smudge talc he now suspected suggested a careful hand, perhaps one accustomed to handling delicate objects. His little grey cells danced, connecting Reed's familiarity with the manner, Charles's lie, and Clara's guarded silence. Hastings joined him, his face eager. "Any luck, Poirot? That red fellow seemed shifty to me." "Shifty, perhaps. But not guilty yet," Poirot replied. "The glove, it is a clue, but not the whole story. The thief used the moment of distraction, likely Charles's toast, to act. But where is the necklace now? It is here, Hastings, hidden in plain sight. Or in shadow." He paused, his eyes scanning the manor's ivy-clad walls. "Tonight we watch. The thief will move, and we will be ready. My little grey cells, they have begun to map the crime." As they returned to the manor for lunch, Poirot felt a quiet satisfaction. The interviews had yielded fragments read. Knowledge, Charles's lie, Clara's reserve, but fragments were enough. The puzzle was taking shape, and the star of azure would not elude him for long. Chapter 3. The Hidden Motive. The afternoon light slanted through the tall windows of Ashford Manor, painting the oak-panelled morning room in hues of amber and gold. Hercule Poirot sat at a small writing desk, his notebook open, his pen poised like a conductor's baton. The theft of the Star of Azure, Lady Beatrice Ashford's sapphire necklace, had stirred the household into a quiet frenzy, and Poirot's little grey cells were ablaze with the challenge. The glove, the waiter's wariness, and Charles Warwick's clumsy lie had given him threads to pull. But now he sought the motive, the hidden pulse beneath the crime. Captain Hastings paced the room, his brow furrowed. "Poirot, this business is getting murkier by the hour. Charles is in debt, Reed knows too much, and Miss Henshaw's got eyes like a hawk. Where do we start?" Poirot's moustache curved slightly. "Mon ami, we start where all great puzzles begin, with the why. The thief took the necklace, not for its beauty, but for what it represents. Money, power, revenge. These are the colours of motive, and we must paint the picture." Poirot had requested access to Lady Beatrice's guest records, a discreet inquiry into the backgrounds of those present on the night of the theft. The butler, a stoic man named Grayson, delivered a leather-bound ledger with a bow. "Everything you need, Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice as crisp as his starched collar. "Lady Beatrice keeps meticulous notes on her guests." "Merci, Monsieur Grayson," Poirot replied, his eyes already scanning the pages. "The past, it whispers secrets the present tries to hide." The ledger revealed a tapestry of lives woven with ambition and shadow. Charles Warwick, Lady Beatrice's nephew, was drowning in gambling debts. His inheritance from his late father squandered on cards and horses. Miss Clara Henshaw, the companion, had a modest background but a curious gap in her history, a year unaccounted for before joining the Ashford household. Victor Duval, the painter, had a reputation for flamboyance, but also a string of unpaid creditors. Mrs. Eleanor Price, the heiress, seemed untouchable, yet her late husband's business dealings hinted at unsavoury connections. Thomas Reed, the waiter, was listed simply as a temporary hire, his past a blank slate. Poirot's little grey cells seized on these details, but it was a passing comment from Grayson that sparked his interest. Lady Beatrice's late husband, Sir Edmund, was quite the collector, the butler said as he tidied a tray. Gems, artifacts, secrets, he hoarded them all. The Star of Azure was his pride, but it came with whispers of a scandal. Poor eyes gleamed. "A scandal, you say? Tell me more, monsieur." Grayson hesitated, then lowered his voice. "It's old gossip, sir. Sir Edmund bought the sapphire from a dealer in Istanbul, but there were rumours it was stolen from a noble family. He never spoke of it, but Lady Beatrice, she wears it like a badge of defiance." Poirot nodded, filing the tidbit away. A stolen gem, a scandal buried in time here, was a motive's shadow. He decided to probe deeper, starting with Charles Warwick, whose debts made him a prime suspect. Poirot found Charles in the conservatory, a glass house filled with exotic orchids and the hum of bees. The young man was pruning a plant with exaggerated care, his hands unsteady. "Monsieur Warwick," Poirot said, his voice smooth as silk, "your aunt's necklace. It is a heavy burden, Nan. A man in your position might see it as Alsatian." Charles's pruning shears paused, a bead of sweat on his brow. "I told you, Monsieur Poirot, I didn't take it. I'm not that desperate." Poirot tilted his head, his gaze piercing. "Desperate enough to lie about a toast, perhaps, or two. No more about the Star of Azure than you admit. It's history. It is not so clean, is it?" Charles's face paled, his fingers tightening on the shears. "What are you getting at?" "It's just a necklace. Just a necklace." Poirot's voice was a velvet whip. "None, monsieur. It is a legacy, a scandal, a motive. You know of Sir Edmund's dealings, do you not? The sapphire's origins, they trouble you." Charles set the shears down, his bravado crumbling. "All right, I heard the stories. Uncle Edmund bought it cheap, probably knowing it was stolen. But that's ancient history. I didn't touch it, I swear." Poirot's little grey cells hummed. Charles's admission confirmed the scandal, but not his guilt. The young man's fear was real, but was it fear of discovery or something else? Poirot dismissed him, his mind already turning to Clara Henshaw. He found Clara in the drawing-room, embroidering a cushion with meticulous stitches. Her calm demeanour was a fortress, but Poirot was adept at breaching walls. "Mademoiselle Henshaw," he began, settling opposite her, "you are close to Lady Beatrice. You know her treasures, her secrets. The Star of Azure, it carries a weight, does it not?" Clara's needle paused, her eyes meeting his. "It's a beautiful piece, monsieur." "Poirot, but I'm not one for gossip. I focus on my duties." Poirot smiled, undeterred. "Duties, yes, but you are observant. You know of Sir Edmund's past, perhaps. A scandal tied to the sapphire, a reason someone might wish to take it." Her fingers resumed their work, but a slight tremor betrayed her. "I've heard rumours, like everyone. Sir Edmund was ambitious. The necklace was his triumph, but it made enemies. That's all I know." Poirot leaned forward, his voice low. "Enemies, mademoiselle? Or perhaps someone closer, someone who resents Lady Beatrice's pride in wearing it?" Clara's eyes flashed, a spark of defiance. "If you're implying I took it, you're mistaken. I'm loyal to her, more than you know." Poirot nodded, sensing truth in her words, but also a hidden wound. Clara's loyalty was fierce, but her resentment perhaps at her subservient role was a motive worth exploring. As evening approached, Poirot retreated to the terrace, the air cool and scented with roses. Hastings joined him, his face eager. "Well, Poirot, any closer to the thief?" Poirot's fingers traced the glove in his pocket, its talc smudge a persistent clue. "The motive, Hastings, it is clearer now. The Star of Azure is not just a jewel, it is a symbol of greed, of vengeance, of a past unburied. Charles's debts, Clara's secrets, the scandal of Sir Edmund, they form a constellation. And my little grey cells are mapping its stars." He paused, his gaze distant. "But there is more." The waiter read, "His knowledge of the manor suggests a connection we have not yet seen. And this glovet is not merely lost. It was placed to mislead, or perhaps to mark the thief's path." Hastings frowned. "So, what's next?" "Another round of questions." "Nan," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "We test. Tomorrow I will plant a seed of false clue and watch how our suspects react. The thief, they will betray themselves, for the guilty cannot resist the bait." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Poirot felt a quiet satisfaction. The motive was taking shape, a theft born not of impulse, but of a deeper wound tied to the sapphire's tainted history. His little grey cells were weaving the threads Charles's desperation, Clara's hidden resentment, Reed's uncanny familiarity into a pattern. The star of azure was within reach, and Poirot was closing in. Chapter 4. The Psychology of Deception. The morning mist clung to Ashford Manor's gardens, veiling the roses in a gossamer shroud. Inside, the breakfast room buzzed with the strained civility of guests trapped by suspicion. Hercule Poirot, his suit as crisp as the autumn air, sipped his café au lait, his eyes darting across the table like a chessmaster studying the board. The theft of the Star of Azure had tightened its grip on the household, and Poirot's little grey cells were alight with a new strategy to unravel the thief through the delicate art of deception. Captain Hastings, buttering his toast with a frown, leaned toward Poirot. "This lot's getting jumpier by the day, Poirot. You've got something up your sleeve, haven't you?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a spark of mischief in his eyes. "Mon ami, the thief hides behind a mask of innocence, but masks slip under pressure. Today, we apply that pressure test, subtle but precise, to make the guilty squirm." Poirot had devised a plan to plant a false clue, a baited hook, to catch the thief's reaction. He enlisted Lady Beatrice's cooperation, meeting her in the privacy of her study, a room adorned with portraits of stern ancestors. Her face, still, pale from the theft, softened with hope as Poirot outlined his scheme. "Madame," he said, his voice smooth as polished marble, "we will announce that a witness saw a shadow near the dining-room window last night, carrying something blue. The thief, they will react perhaps with fear, perhaps with defiance, but they will betray themselves." Lady Beatrice's fingers twisted a lace handkerchief. "Do you think it will work, Monsieur Poirot? My necklace, it's more than a jewel to me." Poirot bowed slightly. "It will work, madame, because the guilty mind cannot resist the fear of exposure. My little grey cells, they anticipate the ripples of this stone we throw." At lunch, Poirot set the stage. The guests gathered in the dining room, the same space where the sapphire had vanished, now heavy with the weight of unspoken accusations. Poirot rose, his presence commanding silence. "Madame et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and deliberate, "there is news. A groundskeeper reports seeing a figure last night near the dining-room window, holding an object that gleamed blue in the moonlight. The Star of Azure, perhaps, is not far." A ripple of unease swept the table. Charles Warwick's fork clattered against his plate, his face flushing. Clara Henshaw's eyes narrowed, her lips parting as if to speak, then closing tightly. Victor Duval, the painter, laughed nervously, muttering about moonlight and imagination. Mrs. Eleanor Price arched an eyebrow, her voice cutting through the tension. "A groundskeeper. Really, Monsieur Poirot, is this a detective story or a fairy tale?" Poirot smiled, unruffled. "The truth, Madame Price, is often stranger than tales. We shall see." His little grey cells were at work, cataloguing each reaction. Charles's clumsiness suggested panic, but was it guilt or mere nerves? Clara's silence was calculated, her eyes darting to Charles, watching him, or guarding her own secrets. Victor's laughter felt forced, a performance to deflect scrutiny. Mrs. Price's skepticism was too sharp, as if she sought to dismiss the clue before it could point to her. Poirot's bait had another layer. He had asked Grayson, the butler, to discreetly place a small blue ribbon near the dining-room window, visible but unobtrusive, as if dropped in haste. As the meal ended, Poirot lingered, watching as the guests dispersed. Clara was the first to approach the window, her gaze lingering on the ribbon before she turned away, her expression unreadable. Charles followed, his steps hesitant, his fingers brushing the sill as if searching for something. Victor, oblivious, sketched the view. Outside, while Mrs. Price remained at the table, her eyes fixed on Poirot himself. The test yielded results, but Poirot sought more. He summoned Thomas Reed, the waiter, to the library for a private conversation. Reed entered, his movements fluid, but his eyes guarded. Monsieur Reed, Talc's smudged glove from the night of the theft. This was found near the dining table, talc, perhaps, from a careful hand. You handle many objects in your work, Nan. Reed's posture stiffened, his voice steady but clipped. I use no talc, sir. My hands are clean. I told you I was at the sideboard when the necklace went missing. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Clean hands, perhaps, but sharp eyes. You saw the ribbon by the window, did you not? Your glance betrayed. You, as you served the wine. Reed blinked, caught off guard. I saw it, yes. Thought it was litter, nothing more. Rien de plus. Poirot's tone was soft, dangerous. We shall see, monsieur. As Reed left, Poirot's mind churned. Reed's quick glance at the ribbon suggested awareness, but not necessarily guilt. The waiter's knowledge of the manner remained a puzzle piece, one that did not yet fit. Poirot's thoughts turned to Clara and Charles, whose reactions to the false clue were the most telling. He decided to press Clara further, sensing her guarded nature hid a key. He found her in the music room, playing a melancholic tune on the pianoforte. The notes hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotion. Mademoiselle Henshaw, Poirot said, closing the door softly, you saw the ribbon. You thought of the necklace, Nan. Yet you said nothing. Why? Clara's fingers faltered, the music stopping abruptly. I don't know what you mean, Monsieur Poirot. I saw no ribbon. Poirot stepped closer, his voice gentle but unyielding. You lie, mademoiselle, and lies are heavy burdens. You resent Lady Beatrice, perhaps. Her wealth, her pride in the Star of Azure it stings, does it not? Clara's face flushed, her eyes blazing. Resent her. I owe her everything. But, yes, the necklace. It's a symbol of all I'll never have. That doesn't make me a thief. Her outburst was a crack in her armor, and Poirot seized it. Then who, mademoiselle? You see more than you say. Charles, perhaps his debts are a motive, Nan. Clara's hands clenched, her voice dropping to a whisper. Charles is weak, not wicked. But he's not alone in his troubles. Victor. He's been asking about the necklace's value, too curious for an artist. Poirot's little grey cells sparked. Clara's deflection was clever, but her mention of Victor was new a thread to tug. He thanked her and withdrew, his mind racing. Victor's flamboyance, his questions about the sapphire's worth, could they mask a calculating mind? As evening fell, Poirot and Hastings stood on the terrace, the manor's lights glowing against the dusk. Well, Poirot, Hastings said, lighting a cigarette. That ribbon trick stirred things up. Clara's hiding something, and Charles is a nervous wreck. Poirot nodded, his fingers tracing the glove in his pocket. The psychology of deception, Hastings, reveals much. Clara's resentment, Charles's panic, Victor's curiosity, they form a triangle of suspicion. But the ribbon, it has done its work. The thief feels the net tightening. He paused, his eyes on the horizon. Tomorrow we set a trap, a grander one. The thief will move, and my little grey cells will be ready. The star of azure is close, mon ami, and we shall have it. The chapter closed with Poirot's quiet confidence, his mind a labyrinth of clues and motives. The false clue had shaken the guilty, and the glove's talc smudge whispered of a careful hand. The game was afoot, and Hercule Poirot was in his element. Chapter 5. The trap is set. The morning sun pierced the mist over Ashford Manor, illuminating the dukest lawns and casting long shadows from the ancient oaks. Inside, the atmosphere was taut as a violin string, the theft of the star of azure, tightening its grip on the household. Hercule Poirot, his eyes bright with purpose, stood in the morning room, his polished shoes gleaming against the parquet floor. His little grey cells thrummed with anticipation. For today he would set a trap to ensnare the thief, a meticulous performance designed to expose the guilty Captain Hastings. Nursing a cup of tea, leaned against a sideboard. "Poirot, you've been cryptic all morning. What's this trap you're brewing? Another ribbon trick?" Poirot's moustache curved into a sly smile. "Nan, mon ami," the ribbon was a whisper. "Today we shout. We recreate the night of the theft, every detail, every gesture. The thief will falter, and my little grey cells will catch the stumble." Poirot had spent the night refining his plan, consulting with Lady Beatrice to orchestrate a reenactment of the fateful dinner. The guests would return to the dining room, seated as they were, served the same courses, with the same quartet playing in the background. But Poirot had added a twist, a replica of the star of azure, crafted from glass and borrowed from a local jeweller, would rest on a velvet cushion at the table's centre, a gleaming bait to provoke a reaction. Lady Beatrice, her composure strained, but resolute, met Poirot in her private parlour. "Monsieur Poirot, this reenactment, it's bold. Do you truly believe the thief will reveal themselves?" "Madame," Poirot said, his voice steady as a metronome, "the guilty cannot resist the stage. The necklace, even a false one, will draw their eyes, their fears. Trust in Poirot's method." The dining room was prepared with precision. The mahogany table gleamed, the chandeliers sparkled, and the quartet tuned their strings to the same haunting melody from the night of the theft. The guests filed in, their faces a gallery of unease. Charles Warwick's hands fidgeted with his cufflinks. Clara Henshaw's gaze was fixed on the replica necklace, her lips a tight line. Victor Duval's usual flamboyance was muted, his eyes darting. Mrs. Eleanor Price sat with regal disdain, as if above suspicion. And Thomas Reed, the waiter, moved with his customary grace, though Poirot noted a slight hesitation in his step. Took his place, his eyes scanning the room like a hawk. "Madame et messieurs," he announced, his voice carrying a theatrical weight, "tonight we revisit the night the star of azure vanished. Each of you will play your part as you did. Then observe the necklace, see how it shines, a reminder of what was lost. Let us begin." The first course was served veloute of asparagus, rich and fragrant. Poirot watched as the guests mirrored their actions from the original dinner, their movements stiff with subtle awareness. Charles raised his glass for a toast, his voice faltering. As he glanced at the replica, Clara's spoon paused mid-air, her eyes flickering to the window where the ribbon had been planted. Victor sketched idly on a napkin, but his pencil trembled. Mrs. Price critiqued the soup with a barbed comment, her tone too sharp, as if deflecting attention. As the second course arrived, roast pheasant, identical to the fateful night. Little grey cells were alight. He had instructed Grayson, the butler, to dim the lights briefly, recreating the moment the necklace vanished. As the chandeliers flickered, A collective tension gripped the room. Poirot's gaze locked on Thomas. Reed, who stood at the sideboard, his hands poised over a tray. In that fleeting darkness, Poirot caught a glint something metallic in Reed's pocket, barely visible but unmistakable. The lights returned, and Poirot rose, his voice cutting through the silence. Mesdames et messieurs, a moment, the necklace. It remains untouched, yet the air is heavy with secrets. Let us explore the room, as the thief did. He led the guests in a staged inspection, guiding them past the dining room's tapestries and heavy curtains. His true purpose was to steer them toward a narrow door, half hidden behind a velvet drape which led to a servant's passage. Poirot had discovered it that morning, its hinges oiled, its existence known only to the staff, and, perhaps, the thief regard us, Poirot said, opening the door with a flourish. A passage, discreet, perfect for a swift escape. Did the thief use this, I wonder? Charles coughed, his face flushing. A passage, I had no idea it was there. Clara's eyes widened, but she said nothing. Victor laughed, too loudly. What a discovery, Monsieur Poirot. Like something from a novel. Mrs. Price's voice was icy. Are you suggesting one of us skulked through a servant's corridor? Absurd, Reed, serving wine nearby, froze for a fraction of a second, his hand brushing his pocket. Poirot's little grey cells noted it all. The passage, Reed's reaction. The guests' unease. The reenactment had served its purpose, stirring the pot and revealing a hidden path. As the meal concluded, Poirot excused himself, beckoning Hastings to the library. Mon ami, he said, his voice low, the passage is the key. The thief used it to spirit the necklace away, but not far. The metallic glint in Reed's pocket, perhaps a tool, perhaps a clue, and the guests, their nerves betray them. Hastings frowned. That passage, could anyone have known about it? Reed seems the likely one, with his knack for the manners. Layout Poirot nodded, his fingers tracing the talc-smudged glove in his pocket. Reed is a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole. The passage connects to the kitchens, the cellars, perhaps beyond. We must explore it, but discreetly. That night, under cover of darkness, Poirot and Hastings slipped into the passage. Its narrow walls were lined with dusty shelves, its air thick with the scent of old stone. Poirot's torch revealed faint scratches on the floor, as if something heavy had been dragged. At the passage's end, a trapdoor led to the cellar, but it was locked, its keyhole gleaming with fresh oil. Voila, Poirot whispered, his eyes gleaming. The thief's path, but not their destination. The necklace is still here, Hastings, hidden in a place only a clever mind would choose. They returned to their rooms, the manor silent save for the creak of old wood. Poirot's mind churned, piecing together the passage, Reed's metallic glint, and the guests' reactions. The reenactment had shaken the thief, and the passage's discovery narrowed the field. His little grey cells hummed with satisfaction, for the trap had been set, and the thief was closer to exposure than they knew. Chapter 6. The unexpected Aletha dawn light crept over Ashford Manor, painting the stone facade with a soft glow, as if coaxing secrets from its ancient walls. Hercule Poirot stood at his window, his eyes tracing the garden paths below, where dew sparkled like scattered diamonds. The theft of the Star of Azure had woven a complex web, and last night's reenactment had tightened the strands. The hidden passage, Thomas Reed's metallic glint, and the guests' frayed nerves all pointed to a thief still within reach. Poirot's little grey cells buzzed with purpose. Sensing a breakthrough on the horizon, Captain Hastings, adjusting his tie with a yawn, joined Poirot. That passage was a clever find, Poirot. Think the thief used it to stash the necklace in. The cellar. Poirot's moustache twitched. The passage, mon ami, is a road, not a destination. The necklace is close, but the thief is cunning. Today we seek an alesome who sees what others miss. Poirot's plan was to explore beyond the guests, to those who moved unseen, the staff, the gardeners, the silent observers of the manor's pulse. He had overheard a maid mention a groundskeeper, old Tom, who tended the gardens with a devotion bordering on obsession. Tom's routine took him past the dining room windows on the night of the theft, and Poirot's little grey cells sensed a witness in the shadows. He found old Tom in the rose garden, a weathered man with hands like gnarled roots, pruning bushes with a care that belied his gruff demeanour. His eyes, sharp despite his years, met Poirot's with curiosity. "Mornin', sir," Tom said, wiping his brow. "Heard you're after that stolen jewel. Fancy thing, that sapphire." Poirot bowed slightly, his voice warm. "Monsieur Tom, your garden is a masterpiece, but your eyes, they see more than roses, Nan. On the night of the theft, you were near the dining room. Did you see or hear anything unusual?" Tom leaned on his shears, his gaze distant. "I don't pry, sir, but I was trimming the hedges by the west wing. Heard voices, low and quick, near the dining room window. Couldn't make out words, but one was sharp, like a woman's, and the other deeper, a man maybe. Sounded like they was arguing." Poirot's little grey cells sparked. "Voices, you say? Near the window where the ribbon was found. This is most interesting. Did you see them?" Tom shook his head. "Too dark, sir. But I heard a rustle, like fabric kacheen on the hedge. Then footsteps, heading toward the old stables." Poirot's mind raced. The ribbon, the passage, now voices by the window. A pattern was emerging. "Merci, Monsieur Tom. You have given me a piece of the puzzle. If you recall more, you will tell Poirot, yes?" Tom nodded, a glint of pride in his eyes. "Aye, sir. I don't hold with thieves. If I hear more, I'll find you." As Poirot returned to the manor, Hastings met him in the hall, his face alight with excitement. "Poirot, I've been poking around. Found something odd in the staff quarters. A letter, half-burned, in Reed's room. Couldn't read much, but it mentioned the blue star and midnight." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Formidable, Hastings. The blue star, our sapphire, no doubt. Reed is more than a waiter, but is he the thief or a pawn? We must tread carefully." Poirot decided to confront Reed indirectly, using old Tom's information to unsettle him. He arranged to meet Reed in the pantry, a cramped space filled with the scent of spices and polished silver. Reed entered, his face composed but his fingers twitching. "Monsieur Reed," Poirot began, his tone light but piercing, "the night of the theft, you were busy, Nan." Yet voices were heard by the dining room window, arguing. "A man and a woman, perhaps. You know of this." Reed's hand froze on a teapot. Voices. "I was in the dining room, sir, serving. I heard nothing outside." Poirot leaned closer, his voice a velvet blade. "And yet, a letter in your room speaks of the blue star and midnight. Curious, for a mere waiter, Nan." Reed's face paled, his eyes darting to the door. I found that letter, sir. Someone slipped it under my door. I burned it because it seemed trouble. I swear I'm no thief." Poirot's little grey cells analysed Reed's fear. It was genuine, but laced with evasion. Red knew more. Perhaps not the thief, but entangled in the plot. Very well, monsieur. But Poirot sees all. If you hide the truth, it will find you. As Reed left, Poirot turned to Hastings. The letter, it is a thread, but not the whole cloth. Old Tom's voices suggest a conspiracy to people, perhaps working together. The woman, could it be Clara? The man, Charles or Victor? Hastings scratched his chin, or read himself, playing innocent. That letter's damning. Poirot nodded, his mind weaving the clues, the gloves, talc, the passage, the ribbon, the voices, the letter. But old Tom's account needed verification. He returned to the rose garden, this time examining the hedge near the dining room window. His sharp eyes spotted a snagger scrap of dark fabric caught in the thorns. Its texture fine, like silk, Voilà Poirot murmured, pocketing the scrap. The rustle Tom heard. This fabric, it belongs to someone who moved quickly, perhaps in flight. He showed the scrap to old Tom, who squinted at it. Aye, that's like what I heard catching on the hedge. Could be from a lady's dress or a man's coat. Hard to say. Poirot's little grey cells danced. The fabric was a tangible link. To the voices, narrowing the suspects. Clara's dresses were plain, but she had access to finer garments. Charles's coats were tailored. Victor's more bohemian. Mrs. Price favoured silk, but her composure seemed unshakable. Reed's uniform was cotton, unlikely to match. As evening fell, Poirot sat in the library, sketching a mental map of the crime, the voices, the fabric, the letter. They pointed to a plot deeper than a simple theft. Old Tom had become an unexpected ally, his keen ears providing a clue no one else had noticed. Poirot felt a quiet satisfaction. The thief's circle was shrinking, and the star of azure was closer than ever. Hastings, he said, as his friend joined him, old Tom has given us a gift. The voices, the fabric, they confirm a conspiracy. Tomorrow we press harder, using this scrap to provoke. The thief will feel the noose tighten. Hastings grinned. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Like a cat with a mouse. Poirot's eyes twinkled. The mouse, mon ami, thinks it. Runs free, but Poirot's little grey cells are the cat. The game is ours. Chapter 7. The shadow of doubt, the late morning light, filtered through the stained glass windows of Ashford Manor, casting kaleidoscopic patterns across the marble floor of the great hall. Hercule Poirot stood by a towering bookcase, his fingers grazing the spine of an old volume, his mind a whirl of connections. The theft of the Star of Azure had deepened into a labyrinth of motives and secrets, and the closet Tom's overheard voices, the silk scrap, the half-burned letter pointed to a conspiracy rooted in the manor's past. Poirot's little grey cells were alight, sensing a darker thread, a link to a decades-old scandal that cast a shadow over the present crime. Captain Hastings, polishing his spectacles with a handkerchief, joined Poirot. This case is getting murkier. Voices in the garden, secret passages, and now that letter mentioning the blue star. Think we're dealing with more than a jewel thief. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice low. Mon ami, the Star of Azure is a spark that ignites old flames. The scandal of Sir Edmund Ashford, Lady Beatrice's late husband, it is no mere gossip. It is the key to the motive, and today we uncover its shadow. Poirot had requested access to Sir Edmund's private papers, stored in a locked cabinet in the study. Lady Beatrice, her face etched with unease, granted permission, though her fingers trembled as she handed over the key. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "Edmund's dealings were complex. I trust you'll be discreet." Madame Poirot replied, bowing, "Discretion is my creed, but the truth, it must be faced. The sapphire's history, it holds the thief's motive." The study was a time capsule of Sir Edmund's life. Mahogany shelves lined with ledgers, a portrait of the stern patriarch glaring from the wall, and a faint scent of cigar smoke lingering in the air. Poirot unlocked the cabinet, revealing a trove of documents, letters, contracts, and a journal bound in cracked leather. His little grey cells guided his hands as he sifted through the papers, pausing at a yellowed letter dated 20 years prior. It was from a Turkish merchant, accusing Sir Edmund of purchasing the Star of Azure from a disreputable Saucer noble family's stolen heirloom. The letter hinted at a confrontation, unresolved, and a veiled threat of retribution. "Voilà," Poirot murmured, showing the letter to Hastings. "The sapphire's curse is not superstition, it is a grudge carried across years." Hastings frowned, scanning the faded ink. "So, someone's after revenge. But who here has ties to that family?" Poirot's mind raced, cross-referencing the guests' backgrounds. Clara Henshaw's unaccounted year intrigued him. Could she have connections to Istanbul? Victor Duval's travels as an artist might have taken him to Turkey. Charles Warwick, as Sir Edmund's nephew, would know the family secrets. Even Thomas Reed, with his mysterious past, could be linked. Mrs. Eleanor Price, with her late husband's shady dealings, was another possibility. Poirot decided to test this new thread by confronting Victor Duval, whose curiosity about the sapphires' value had raised Clara's suspicions. He found Victor in the conservatory, painting a vibrant orchid with bold strokes. The artist's eyes lit up at Poirot's approach, but his smile was strained. "Monsieur Duval," Poirot began, his tone deceptively casual, "your art, it takes you to many places, Nan. Perhaps Istanbul, where the Star of Azure was born." Victor brush paused, a drop of crimson paint dripping onto the canvas. "Istanbul. I've been there, yes, years ago. Why do you ask?" Poirot leaned closer, his voice soft but piercing. "The sapphire, it has a history, a noble family, a theft, a scandal. You asked about its value, monsieur. Did you know its past?" Victor's laugh was sharp, almost brittle. "I'm an artist, not a historian. I heard rumors. Sure, every gem has a story. But I'm here to paint, not pilfer." Poirot's little grey cells noted the evasion. Victor's travels aligned with the sapphire's origins, but his denial lacked conviction. "Very well," Poirot said, dismissing him. "But the past, it has a way of catching up." Next, Poirot sought Mrs. Eleanor Price, whose late husband's business dealings might connect to the scandal. He found her in the drawing room, reading a newspaper with an air of detached authority. "Madame Price," Poirot said, settling opposite her. "Your husband, he was a man of commerce, Nan. Did his dealings ever touch the markets of Istanbul, perhaps involving rare gems?" Mrs. Price lowered her paper, her eyes like steel. "My husband dealt in many things, Monsieur Poirot, but I don't recall gems. Why this sudden interest in ancient history?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "The Star of Azure, it was stolen long ago, before Sir Edmund claimed it. A family's honour was tarnished. You, with your keen mind, would know if such a grudge lingered, Nan." Her lips curled into a faint smile. "You're fishing, Monsieur Poirot. I know nothing of grudges or stolen sapphires." My interest is in the present, not some dusty scandal." Her deflection was smooth, but Poirot caught a flicker of unease. In her posture, Mrs. Price was hiding something, perhaps not the theft itself, but a connection to the sapphire's past. His little grey cells filed it away, alongside Victor's evasion and Clara's resentment. As evening approached, Poirot retreated to the terrace, the silk scrap and talc-smudged glove in his pocket like talismans. Hastings joined him, his face eager. "That letter from Istanbul's a bombshell, Poirot. Think the thief's settling an old score?" Poirot nodded, his gaze on the darkening sky. "The scandal, it is the heart of the motive. Someone, here Victor, Clara, perhaps another note. The sapphire's true cost, the voices old Tom heard, the passage, the letter, they all point to a plan rooted in vengeance." He paused, his fingers brushing the silk scrap. "But there is more. This fabric, it is from the night of the theft, caught in the hedge. It is fine, like a lady's gown or a gentleman's coat. We must find its owner." Hastings grinned. "You're closing in, aren't you? I can see it in your eyes." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The shadow of doubt grows longer, mon ami. Tomorrow we press further, using the scandal to unsettle our suspects. The thief feels the pressure, and they will make a mistake." As night fell, Poirot stood alone, his mind a tapestry of clues. The Turkish letter, the silk scrap, the voices, the passage. The star of azure was a beacon of greed and revenge, and his little grey cells were unravelling its secrets. The chapter closed with a quiet triumph. Poirot had found the motive's root, and the thief's mask was slipping. Chapter 8. The game of alibis. The midday sun bathed Ashford Manor in a golden haze, its warmth doing little to ease the chill of suspicion that gripped the household. Hercule Poirot sat in the library, surrounded by towering shelves and the faint must of old books, his notebook open to a page filled with precise, looping script. The theft of the Star of Azure had woven a complex puzzle, and the clues, the talc-smudged glove, the silk scrap, the hidden passage, old Tom's overheard voices, and the Turkish letter pointed to a conspiracy steeped in vengeance. Poirot's little grey cells were alight, ready to challenge the alibis of the guests and staff, to expose the cracks in their stories. Captain Hastings burst into the room, his face flushed with excitement. "Poirot, I've been watching Reed, like you asked. Caught him lingering near the dining room again, looking shifty. Think he's our man?" Poirot's moustache twitched, his eyes gleaming. "Mon ami, Reed is a thread, but not yet the needle. Alibis, Hastings, they are the scaffolding of deception. Today we dismantled them, one by one, with the precision of a surgeon." Poirot had devised a new strategy, a rapid-fire series of interviews to test the guests' accounts of the night, of the theft. By asking pointed, overlapping questions, he aimed to uncover inconsistencies. Knowing the guilty would falter under pressure, he began with Charles Warwick, whose earlier lie about a toast had already marked him as unsteady. Charles entered the library, his usual charm replaced by a nervous tick in his jaw. He sat, crossing his arms defensively. "Monsieur Poirot, I've told you everything. I was at the table, eating, when the necklace went missing." Poirot leaned forward, his voice smooth but sharp. "Everything, Monsieur Warwick. Yet you claimed to propose a toast, then denied it. Let us be precise." "At the moment," Lady Beatrice gasped, "where were your hands?" "Your eyes." Charles's fingers drummed on his knee. "My hands on my glass, I suppose. My eyes On my aunt, naturally. I was shocked, like everyone. Poirot's gaze pierced him. Shocked, yet you looked toward the window, Nan. Where? The ribbon was later found, and the voices old Tom heard arguing near that same window. Were you there, perhaps, with another? Charles's face reddened. Voices. I was inside. I didn't hear anything. You're twisting things, Poirot. Poirot noted the panic, the quick denial. Twisting. None. I unravel. Merci, monsieur. As Charles left, Poirot jotted in his notebook. Charles' alibi, inconsistent eyes on window. Fearful, but of what? Next, Poirot summoned Clara Henshaw, whose guarded demeanour and resentment toward Lady Beatrice intrigued him. Clara entered, her plain dress immaculate, her eyes wary. Mademoiselle Henshaw, Poirot began, you sat beside Lady Beatrice. Tell me, in the moment of the theft, what did you see? Not the necklace, but the faces around you. Clara's, hands folded tightly in her lap. I saw confusion. Charles looked pale. Victor was sketching. Mrs. Price was glaring at her plate. I was focused on Lady Beatrice. She was distraught. Poirot tilted his head. And Thomas Reed, the waiter. Where was he? Clara hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. At the sideboard, I think, serving wine. I didn't pay much attention. Poirot's little grey cells seized on the pause. You think, mademoiselle, yet you notice everything. Did you see Reed near the window, perhaps, or hear voices outside? Her eyes widened, then narrowed. I told you, I was with Lady Beatrice. I heard nothing outside. The denial was too quick, and Poirot filed it away. Merci, mademoiselle. Your memory, it is selective, but helpful. Victor Devol was next, his bohemian flair subdued as he slumped into the chair. Monsieur Devol, Poirot said, your sketches, they capture moments. What did you capture during the second course, when the necklace vanished? Victor's fingers toyed with a paint-stained cuff. I was drawing. The chandelier's light on the table. Didn't notice much Elsart takes focus, you know. Poirot's voice sharpened. Focus, yes, but your eyes wandered to the necklace, Nan. And your travels to Istanbul, they teach you the value of such gems. Victor's laugh was hollow. I told you, I'm no jewel expert. I was sketching, not stealing. Poirot leaned back, his eyes narrowing. And the window. Did you glance there, perhaps hearing voices, as old Tom did? Victor's hand froze. Voices no, I was at the table. You're barking up the wrong tree, Poirot. The artist's unease was palpable, and Poirot dismissed him, noting, Victor alibi, vague, evasive on Istanbul. Possible link to voices. Mrs. Eleanor Price entered with the air of a queen, her posture rigid. Madame Price, Poirot said, your composure is admirable, but on the night of the theft, where were your eyes? On the necklace or elsewhere? Mrs. Price's smile was icy. I was critiquing the pheasant, Monsieur Poirot. Hardly the moment for thievery. And the window. Poirot pressed. A ribbon was found there. Voices heard. Your husband's dealings, did they ever involve Turkish gems? Her eyes flashed. My husband's business is not your concern. I saw nothing, heard nothing. This is tiresome. Poirot nodded, sensing a wall but also a crack. Mrs. Price, defensive, dismissive, hiding knowledge. Finally, Poirot called Thomas Reed. The waiter entered, his movements precise, but his eyes guarded. Monsieur Reed, Poirot said, your alibi is the sideboard, serving wine. Yet a letter in your room spoke of the Blue Star. And the passage, did you use it that night? Reed's jaw tightened. I've said it before, sir. No thief. The letter was planted, and I know nothing about passages. I was pouring wine when it happened. Poirot's voice dropped, soft but lethal. And the metallic glint in your pocket during the reenactment. A tool, perhaps, for a lock. Reed's hand instinctively touched his pocket, then dropped. A key, sir, for the wine cellar. Nothing more. Poirot dismissed him, his mind cataloguing. Alibi, consistent but letter-damning. Key or tool. As evening fell, Poy timeline in his notebook, marking each guest's position during the theft. Charles's lie about the toast, Clara's selective memory, Victor's vague sketching, Mrs. Price's deflection, and Reed's Kyle formed a pattern of half-truths. The voices by the window, the silk scrap, and the passage suggested a coordinated effort. But Reed's role puzzled him most. Hastings, Poirot said, as his friend joined him in the library. The alibis, they crumble like dry leaves. Reed is not the thief. I think he is too exposed, too watched. But he knows something, perhaps coerced. The voices old Tom heard they point to a man and a woman. Hastings nodded. Clara and Charles, maybe. Or Victor and Mrs. Price. Poirot's eyes twinkled. The net tightens. Mon ami. Tomorrow we explore the passage further, and we watch, Reed. His key, it may unlock more than wine. The chapter closed with Poirot's quiet satisfaction. The alibis had revealed the conspiracy's outline, and his little grey cells were closing in on the truth. The star of azure was within the manor, and the thief's mask was fraying. Chapter 9. The clue in the garden. The early afternoon sun hung over Ashford Manor, its rays piercing the canopy of ancient elms to dapple the gardens below. Hercule Poirot, his suit immaculate despite the faint dust of exploration, stood among the manicured hedges, his eyes scanning the earth with the intensity of a hawk. The theft of the Star of Azure had woven a tapestry of deception, and the threads old Tom's overheard voices, the silk scrap, the hidden passage, the Turkish scandal, and Thomas Reed's dubious key had tightened Poirot's resolve. His little grey cells hummed, sensing the thief's trail led beyond the manor's walls, into the verdant labyrinth of its grounds. Captain Hastings, trailing behind with a notebook, swatted at a bee. Poirot, are we chasing shadows out here? The necklace is probably stashed in a drawer, not a flower bed. Poirot's moustache twitched, a glimmer of amusement in his eyes. Mon ami, the thief is clever, but not invisible. The voices old Tom heard, the silk caught in the hedge, they point to the garden. We search not for the necklace, but for its path. Poirot's plan was methodical, to retrace the thief's movements from the dining-room window, where the ribbon and voices had been noted, to the old stables old Tom had mentioned. The garden, with its maze of paths and hidden nooks, was a perfect stage for a thief to conceal their tracks. Their prize, Poirot began at the hedge where the silk scrap was found, its thorns still clutching a few dark threads. He knelt, his fingers brushing the soil, and noticed a faint indentation, as if a heavy object had been set down briefly. Regardez, Poirot said, pointing to the mark. Something rested here, perhaps a bag, a box. The thief paused. But why? Hastings squinted. To hide something. Or maybe they were meeting someone. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. Precisement, the voices arguing, old Tom said. A rendezvous gone awry, perhaps. He followed the path toward the stables, a crumbling stone structure half overgrown with ivy. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and wild mint. Poirot's sharp eyes caught a glint in the grass, a tiny shard of glass, its edge polished, as if from a broken ornament. He pocketed it, his little grey cells sparking. Glass, Hastings, not a bottle, but something finer. A clue, perhaps, to the thief's haste. At the stables, Poirot found the door ajar, its hinges rusted but recently disturbed. Inside, the air was cool and musty, the floor littered with straw and old tools. Poirot's torch swept the shadows, landing on a wooden crate tucked behind a stack of hay bales. He approached, his movements deliberate, and lifted the lid. Inside was a small metal box, locked, its surface scratched but sturdy. Voila, Poirot murmured, his voice tinged with triumph. A hiding place, but for what? Hastings peered over his shoulder. The necklace. Can we open it? Poirot examined the lock, noting its simplicity. Not yet, mon ami. To force it is to alert the thief. But this box, it is no coincidence. We leave it, but we watch. Before leaving, Poirot's torch caught another detail, a faint smudge of blue, paint on the crate's edge, vibrant and fresh. His mind connected it to Victor Duval, the painter, whose bohemian flair included a palette of vivid colors. Was Victor sketching a cover for a visit to the stables? Or was the paint a deliberate misdirection? Returning to the manor, Poirot sought old Tom, the groundskeeper, whose keen ears had already proven invaluable. He found the old man tending a bed of chrysanthemums, his hands caked with soil. Monsieur Tom, Poirot said, your eyes and ears, they miss nothing. The stables, have you seen anyone there since the theft? Tom scratched his chin, his gaze sharp. Funny you ask, sir. Saw that artist fellow, Duval, poking around yesterday morning. Said he was looking for inspiration, but he was in a hurry, like he didn't want to be seen. Poirot's little grey cells danced. Inspiration, you say? And did he carry anything, a bag, a box? Tom shook his head. Nothing I could see, but he kept his coat tight, like he was hiding something. Poirot thanked him, his mind weaving the new clues. The glass shard, the locked box, the blue paint, Victor's presence. He decided to confront Victor, but subtly, to avoid spooking him. He found the painter in the conservatory, dabbing at a canvas with a distracted air. Monsieur Duval, Poirot began, his tone light. Your art, it thrives in the open air, Nan. The stables, perhaps, inspired you yesterday. Victor's brush slipped, a streak of ochre marring his canvas. The stables, yes, I wandered there. Rustic charm, you know, for a sketch. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And did you find a crate, perhaps, or leave a touch of blue paint, so vibrant, like your palette? Victor's face paled, his laugh forced. Paint? I don't know what you mean. I just sketched the ivy. Poirot nodded, dismissing him, but noting Victor evasive at stables. Paint links him, but is he thief or decoy? Back in the library, Poirot examined the glass shard under a magnifying glass, confirming it was not ordinary but cut, like part of a gemstone setting. His mind flashed to the star of Agatha. The thief have damaged it in their haste. Or was the shard from a fake, a substitute to mislead? Hastings joined him, his eyes wide. That box, Poirot think it's the necklace. And Victor's. Paint what's his game? Poirot's fingers traced the silk scrap in his pocket. The box, it is a clue, but not the prize. The paint, the glass, they suggest a deception within a deception. Victor is involved, but not alone. The voices, the passage, the scandal, they point to a pair, working together. He paused, his gaze distant. Tomorrow we watch the stables. The thief will return, drawn to their secret. My little grey cells, they sense the truth is near. As dusk settled over the manor, Poirot stood on the terrace, the glass shard and silk scrap in his hands. The garden had yielded a vital clue, and old Tom's alliance had sharpened the trail. The star of azure was close, hidden in a web of lies, and Poirot's trap was ready to spring. Chapter 10. The masquerade unravelled. The evening air hung heavy over Ashford Manor, scented with jasmine and the promise of revelation. Hercule Poirot, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the chase, adjusted his bow tie in the grand hall's gilded mirror. The theft of the star of azure had drawn a net of suspicion around the guests, and the clue, the talc-smudged glove, the silk scrap, the hidden passage, old Tom's voices, the Turkish scandal, and the locked box with its blue paint had tightened. The weave. Tonight, Lady Beatrice had agreed to host a masquerade ball, a glittering stage for Poirot to unmask the thief. His little grey cells were poised, ready to turn the thief's own deception against them. Captain Hastings, tugging at his ill-fitting masker, Black Domino with a rakish feather grumbled beside Poirot. A ball, Poirot, with a thief on the loose. This feels like a lark, not detective work. Poirot's moustache twitched, a spark of mischief in his gaze. Mon ami, the masquerade is the perfect trap. Behind masks, the guilty let their guards slip. We watch, we provoke, and we reveal. The plan was bold. Poirot had arranged for the glass shard from the garden to be displayed on a velvet cushion in the ballroom, announced as a fragment of evidence tied to the theft. The replica necklace, used in the reenactment, would also be present, worn by Lady Beatrice to bait the thief. Poirot's little grey cells anticipated a reaction: fear, greed, or a reckless move to reclaim what was hidden. The ballroom glittered, its chandeliers casting prisms across masked faces and swirling gowns. The quartet played a lively waltz, and guests moved in a kaleidoscope of silk and satin. Lady Beatrice, resplendent in a silver mask and the replica necklace, glided through the crowd, her smile masking her nerves. Charles Warwick, in a harlequin mask, laughed too loudly at a jest. Clara Henshaw, her plain dress traded for a deep green gown and a feathered mask, hovered near the edges, her eyes watchful. Victor Duval, his mask painted with vibrant swirls, danced with theatrical flair. Mrs. Eleanor Price, in a crimson mask, exuded icy elegance. Thomas Reed, serving champagne in a simple black mask, moved with his usual grace, but Poirot noted his gaze lingering on the glass shards display. Poirot, masked as a Venetian noble, circulated with ease, his ears tuned to every whisper. He paused by the glass shard, displayed on a table near the French doors, and announced to a cluster of guests, "Mesdames et messieurs, this shard, found in the garden, is a clue to the star of azure's fate. Perhaps the thief knows its story." A hush fell, masks turning toward the glinting fragment. Charles's glass trembled, spilling champagne. Clara's hand tightened on her fan. Victor's dance faltered, his eyes darting to the shard. Mrs. Price's lips curled in a faint sneer, but her fingers twitched. Reed, pouring wine nearby, froze, his mask hiding all but a flicker of alarm. Poirot's little grey cells catalogued each reaction, but it was Clara who drew his focus. She drifted toward the French doors, her movements deliberate, as if drawn to the garden beyond. Poirot followed, signalling Hastings to watch the others. Outside, the moonlit terrace was quiet, the air cool against his skin. Clara stood by a stone urn, her mask tilted as she gazed at the stable's silhouette. "Mademoiselle Henshaw," Poirot said softly, stepping from the shadows, "the night air. It is refreshing, Nan. Or do you seek something else? Perhaps the box in the stables?" Clara spun, her mask slipping slightly, revealing wide eyes. "Monsieur Poirot, I needed air. The Chardit unsettled me." Poirot's voice was gentle but unyielding. "Unsettled, because it links to the theft. You know the sapphire's history, its scandal. Did you argue by the window that night with another?" Clara's breath caught, her hands clenching. "I wasn't at the window, but I know the sapphire's past. Lady Beatrice told me years ago Sir Edmund's shame, the stolen gem. It's why she wears it, to defy the whispers." Poirot leaned closer, his eyes piercing. "And you, mademoiselle, do you defy her, or do you seek to right an old wrong?" Her voice cracked, a raw edge to it. "I'd never steal from her, but someone else. They asked me about the sapphire, its value, its curse. I didn't know they meant to take it." Poirot's little grey cells sparked. "Someone else? Name them, mademoiselle." Clara hesitated, then whispered, "Victor. He's obsessed with its worth, always sketching it, asking questions. I thought it was just his art, but now—" Poirot nodded, dismissing her gently. Clara's confession was a crack in the case, implicating Victor but also revealing her own complicity, however unwitting. He returned to the ballroom, where the waltz had given way to a lively polka. Victor was now near the shards display, his mask askew, his fingers brushing the table as if testing its reality. Poirot approached, his voice low. "Monsieur Duval, the shard intrigues you, Nan. A piece of the puzzle, perhaps from a setting you know well." Victor's laugh was strained, his mask slipping further. "A shard, just glass, Poirot. You're seeing mysteries where there are none." But Poirot saw the sweat on Victor's brow, the way his eyes flicked to the stables. He dismissed him, his mind racing. Clara's words, Victor's reaction, the blue paint on the crate, they pointed to the artist, but was he the mastermind, or a pawn? As the ball reached its peak, Poirot noticed Reed slipping through the French doors, a tray abandoned. He signalled Hastings, and they followed, moving silently into the garden. Reed paused by the hedge, his mask removed, his face taut with urgency. He bent, searching the ground, then moved toward the stables. Poirot's heart quickened. Hastings. The thief moves. The shard, the necklace, they draw him out. They trailed Reed, keeping to the shadows. At the stables, Reed knelt by the crate, his hands fumbling with the locked box. Poirot stepped forward, his voice a whip. "Monsieur Reed, you seek what does not belong to you, Nan." Reed froze, his eyes wide. I was checking it, sir. Someone told me to guard it, said it was important." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Who, monsieur? Speak, or Poirot will assume the worst." Reed's voice trembled. "A note slipped under my door. It said the box held the truth about the sapphire. I didn't steal it, I swear." Poirot's little grey cells hummed. Reed's story echoed the burned letter, suggesting manipulation. The masquerade had worked, flushing out movement, but the true thief remained elusive. He let Reed go, knowing the waiter was a link, not the chain. Back in the library, Poirot debriefed Hastings. The shard, the box, Clara's confession, they tightened the net. Victor is involved, but someone pulls his strings. The motive, it is vengeance, tied to the sapphire's past. Hastings grinned. You're enjoying this, Poirot. The ball was a stroke of genius. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The masquerade, mon ami, has unmasked truths. Tomorrow we follow the box's trail. The star of azure is near, and the thief's mask is crumbling. The chapter closed with Poirot's quiet triumph, the ball's chaos yielding a clearer path to the truth. Chapter 11. The masterminds moved the twilight sky over Ashford Manor, glowed with hues of violet and amber, casting long shadows across the estate's manicured lawns. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, his silhouette sharp against the flickering firelight, his fingers tracing the edges of the talc-smudged glove and silk scrap in his pocket. The theft of the Star of Azure had unraveled into a tapestry of deception, woven from old Tom's overheard voices, the hidden passage, the Turkish scandal, the blue-painted crate, and Clara's reluctant confession implicating Victor Duval. The masquerade ball had stirred the thief, and Thomas Reed's desperate search for the locked box in the stables had confirmed a deeper plot. Poirot's little grey cells thrummed with certainty. The thief was not acting alone, but guided by a mastermind lurking in the shadows. Captain Hastings, sprawled in an armchair, tossed a crumpled note onto the table. Found this in the hall. Another anonymous scribble, addressed to Reed, says, "Move the box tonight, or the truth comes out." Sounds like someone's pulling strings. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he examined the note, its ink fresh, its handwriting sharp and deliberate. Mon ami, this is no mere thief's game. A mastermind orchestrates, using fear to control. Reed is a pawn, but who holds the board? Poirot's strategy was clear, to follow the trail of the anonymous notes, which had ensnared, read, and hinted at a larger scheme. The note's mention of the truth echoed the Turkish scandal tied to Sir Edmund Ashford, suggesting the mastermind sought not just the sapphire, but vengeance for a past wrong. Poirot's little grey cells connected the clues, the voices by the window, the silk scrap, the glass shard, and now the notes, all pointing to a coordinated effort. He began with a visit to the manor's post-room, a cramped nook where letters were sorted. Grayson, the butler, confirmed that no external mail had arrived since the theft, meaning the notes were written within the manor. Poirot's sharp eyes spotted a discarded pen on the desk, its nib stained with the same sharp ink as the note. "Interesting," he murmured, pocketing the pen. The mastermind is careless, leaving tools behind. His next move was to shadow Reed, whose fear made him a weak link. Poirot found him in the kitchen, polishing silver with a distracted air. "Monsieur Reed," Poirot said, his voice soft but commanding. "Another note. Nan, you are a puppet, but who pulls your strings? Speak, or the noose tightens." Reed's hands shook, a fork clattering to the floor. "I don't know, sir. The notes come under my door, telling me to check the box, to watch the guests. I thought it was a prank, but then, the sapphire..." Poirot leaned closer, his gaze piercing, "and the box. What did you find inside?" Reed's voice dropped to a whisper. "Nothing, sir. It's locked, and I've no key. But the note said it holds the truth about the theft." Poirot dismissed him, his mind racing. The box was a lure, meant to distract or incriminate. The mastermind was playing a dangerous game, manipulating Reed to divert suspicion. But from whom? Poirot turned his attention to the library, where a dusty archive of Sir Edmund's correspondence might hold answers. He sifted through faded letters, his little grey cells hunting for a connection to the Turkish scandal. One document stood out, a contract from 20 years ago, detailing Sir Edmund's purchase of the Star of Azure from a merchant named Alton Bay, a handwritten note in the margin. In Sir Edmund's hand, mentioned a dispute with a family, member of the original owners, a woman named Layla Demir. Layla Demir, Poirot murmured, his heart quickening. A name, a motive, a shadow from the past. He cross-referenced the guest list, his mind probing for links. Clara Henshaw's unaccounted year could place her in Istanbul, perhaps under an alias. Mrs. Eleanor Price's late husband had traded in exotic goods, possibly crossing paths with the Demir family. Victor Duval's travels were too convenient, his interest in the sapphire too keen. Even Charles Warwick, as Sir Edmund's nephew, might know of Layla's grudge. Poirot decided to test Mrs. Price, whose icy composure masked a potential connection. He found her in the drawing room, arranging roses with a precision that belied her casual air. "Madame Price," Poirot said, "the Star of Azure carries a name from its past. Layla Demir. Does it stir a memory, perhaps, from your husband's dealings?" Mrs. Price's shears paused, a petal falling. "Layla Demir. Never heard of her. My husband dealt with many, but I didn't meddle in his affairs." Poirot's voice was velvet, edged with steel. "Yet you know the sapphire's value, Nan, and the notes slipped under doors they speak of truth. Are you so certain you know nothing?" Her eyes flashed, but her voice remained steady. "You're grasping, Monsieur Poirot. I'm no notraitor, nor a thief." Poirot nodded, sensing a wall but also a tremor. Mrs. Price was too controlled, her denial too polished. He thanked her and withdrew, his mind turning to the stables. The box, with its blue paint and locked secret, was the mastermind's gambit. He resolved to search it again, this time with Hastings as lookout. Under cover of dusk, Poirot and Hastings crept to the stables, the air thick with the scent of hay and earth. The crate stood undisturbed, but Poirot's torch revealed a new detail, a faint scratch on the lock, as if someone had tried to force it. He produced a small tool from his Paquita lockpick, a skill learned in his youth, opened the box with a soft click. Inside was not the sapphire, but a folded paper, its ink matching the anonymous notes. It read, "The star is safe, but the truth burns. Leave it or pay." Poirot's little grey cells sparked. A warning, Hastings, but also a confession. "The mastermind knows we are close." As they returned to the manor, a shadow moved in the garden, a figure, cloaked and swift, vanishing into the hedge. Poirot's heart raced. The mastermind moves. Mon ami. They know we found the note. Hastings gripped his arm. Was that Victor or Clara? Poirot's eyes narrowed. Or another, pulling their strings. The note, the box, the scandal, they point to Layla Demir's shadow. Tomorrow we confront the past directly. The chapter closed with Poirot's quiet resolve, the note a beacon in the dark. The mastermind had made their move, but Poirot's little grey cells were ready to counter. The Star of Azure tantalizingly close. Chapter 12. The final puzzle piece. The morning light streamed through the tall windows of Ashford Manor's drawing room, casting intricate shadows on the polished floor. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre, his posture impeccable, his eyes alight. With the fire of deduction, the theft of the Star of Azure had reached its crescendo. The Cloustalk's smudged glove, silk scrap, hidden passage, old Tom's voices. Turkish scandal, blue-painted crate, and the mastermind's cryptic notes converging into a vivid tapestry. Poirot's little grey cells were at their peak, ready to assemble the final piece and unmask the thief in a grand denouement. Captain Hastings, pacing nervously, adjusted his tie. Poirot, this gathering feels like a showdown. You're sure you've got the thief pinned? Poirot's moustache curved into a confident smile. Mon ami, the puzzle is nearly complete. The thief, they have danced cleverly. But today, Poirot calls the tune. Gather the guests, our stage is set. Poirot had requested Lady Beatrice to summon all suspects to the drawing-room, where the replica necklace rested on a velvet cushion, its glass gems glinting provocatively. The room was arranged with precision, chairs in a semicircle. The French doors opened to the garden, and a small table holding the glass shard and silk scrap as silent witnesses. The guests filed in, their faces a gallery of tension. Charles Warwick's forced grin, Clara Henshaw's guarded stare, Victor Duval's restless fingers, Mrs. Eleanor Price's icy poise, and Thomas Reed's wary deference. Lady Beatrice, her voice steady despite her pallor, addressed the room. Monsieur Poirot has news about my necklace. I trust you'll cooperate fully. Poirot stepped forward, his presence commanding silence. Madame, et messieurs, the star of Azure is within these walls, and the thief among us. Let us unravel the truth, piece by piece, with order and method. He began with the glove, holding it aloft. This, found near the dining table, bears telka sign of a careful hand, perhaps preparing a delicate theft. It was no accident, but a marker. Charles shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting. Poirot continued, producing the silk scrap. This, caught in the hedge, tells of a rendezvous by the window, where voices argued, as old Tom heard a man and a woman plotting. Clara's breath hitched, her hands clenching. Poirot's gaze swept the room. The hidden passage discovered during our reenactment was the thief's escape route, leading to the stables, where a crate held a locked box. And this, he held up the glass shard, suggests a setting broken in haste, perhaps a decoy. Victor's fingers twitched, his face pale. Poirot pressed on, revealing the anonymous note. A mastermind sent notes, manipulating Monsieur Reed to check the box, to divert suspicion. But the true clue lies in the past, the Star of Azure. Stolen by Sir Edmund from the Demere family, a scandal that burns still. Mrs. Price's lips tightened, but she remained silent. Poirot's voice softened, yet carried a lethal edge. The voices, the passage, the notes, they point to a conspiracy, but one detail binds them. The blue paint on the crate, vibrant, like Monsieur Duval's palette. Victor leapt to his feet, his voice shrill. You're mad, Poirot. I'm an artist, not a thief. Poirot's eyes gleamed. An artist, oui, but one who asked too much about the sapphire's value, who lingered at the stables, whose paint betrays him. You were at the window, Nan, with another, arguing, planning. Clara's voice broke the silence, trembling but firm. It wasn't just Victor. I was there too. I didn't steal it, but I helped unwittingly. Victor said he needed to sketch the sapphire, but he wanted its hiding place. The room gasped, Charles's jaw dropping. Poirot nodded, his little grey cells aligning the final pieces. Mademoiselle Henshaw, your honesty is a crack in the facade. But Victor was not the mastermind. He is a tool, driven by greed, manipulated by another. He turned to Mrs. Eleanor Price, whose composure faltered for the first time. "Madame Price, your husband's dealings touched Istanbul, the Demir family. You knew the sapphire's history, its stain, the notes written in sharp ink match a pen in your room. You orchestrated this, Nan, to avenge a past wrong, to humiliate Lady Beatrice." Mrs. Price rose, her voice cold but unsteady. "You have no proof, Poirot. This is speculation." Poirot's smile was triumphant. "Proof, madame. The pen, the notes, your knowledge of the scandal, they are threads. But the final thread is the box it holds, not the sapphire, but a decoy of fake gem placed to mislead. The true star of azure is in your room, hidden in a vase, its blue masked by a clever cloth." A murmur swept the room. Lady Beatrice gasped, her hand to her throat. Poirot signalled Hastings, who had searched Mrs. Price's room earlier, guided by Poirot's deduction. Hastings returned, holding the star of azure, its sapphire gleaming like a captured star. Mrs. Price's face crumpled, her mask of poise shattered. "It was mine by right," she hissed. "My cousin, Leila Demir, lost everything when Edmund stole it. I meant to return it, to restore her honor." Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. "Vengeance, madame, is a poor substitute for justice. You used Victor's greed, Clara's resentment, Reed's fear puppets in your play." But Poirot sees through the curtain. The room fell silent, the weight of truth settling over the guests. Lady Beatrice, tears in her eyes, took the necklace. Her voice soft. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. You've saved more than a jewel." Poirot bowed, his little grey cells glowing with satisfaction. "The truth, madame, is my reward." The chapter closed with the thief exposed, the sapphire recovered, and a lingering question: what drove Mrs. Price to such lengths? Poirot's triumph was complete, but the human heart's shadows remained. Chapter 13. The confession. The late afternoon sun bathed Ashford Manor in a golden glow, its warmth softening the edges of a house still reeling from revelation. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand drawing-room, his silhouette framed against the tall windows, the star of azure now safely returned to Lady Beatrice Ashford's possession. The unmasking of Mrs. Eleanor Price as the mastermind behind the theft had sent ripples through the household. But Poirot's little grey cells sensed one final act was needed to close the Kaiser confrontation, to extract the full truth. The talc-smudged glove, silk scrap, hidden passage, old Tom's voices, Turkish scandal, blue-painted crate, and cryptic notes had all led to this moment, and Poirot was determined to unravel the motive's deepest roots. Captain Hastings, leaning against a marble fireplace, adjusted his cufflinks with a satisfied grin. "You've done it again, Poirot." Mrs. Price caught red-handed, the sapphire back where it belongs. But why'd she go to such lengths? Seems more than just a family grudge. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice low and measured. "Mon ami, the heart of crime is never simple." Mrs. Price wove a web of vengeance, but her reasons run deeper than honor. Today, we draw out her confession, and the puzzle is complete. Poirot had arranged a private meeting with Mrs. Price. In the library, a room steeped in the manor's history, its shelves heavy with the weight of Sir Edmund's secrets. Lady Beatrice, though shaken, insisted on being present, her resolve strengthened by the sapphire's return. The other suspects, Charles Warwick, Clara Henshaw, Victor de Ball, and Thomas Reed, were kept under Grayson's watchful eye there, roles as pawns or accomplices already exposed. Mrs. Price entered the library, her crimson gown a stark contrast to her pale, defiant face. She sat, her posture rigid, her eyes meeting Poirot's with a mix of resignation and fire. "You've had your victory, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice sharp as cut glass. "What more do you want?" Poirot settled opposite her, his hands clasped, his gaze unyielding. "Madame Price, the star of azure is restored, but the truth remains incomplete. You stole not for greed, but for vengeance. Tell me of Layla Demire, your cousin, and why her loss drove you to this." Lady Beatrice, seated nearby, leaned forward, her fingers clutching the sapphire necklace. "Eleanor, if you know something of my husband's wrongs, speak. I deserve to know." Mrs. Price's lips tightened, but her eyes softened, a crack in her armor. "Very well," she said, her voice low, trembling with suppressed emotion. "Layla was my cousin, my closest friend. The star of azure was her family's pride, a symbol of their heritage. When Sir Edmund bought it, he knew it was stolen, taken from Layla's father during a desperate time. He paid a pittance, exploiting their ruin." Poirot nodded, his little grey cells tracing the thread. "And this wrong, it festered, Nan. You sought to reclaim the sapphire, to right the past." Mrs. Price's hands clenched, her voice rising. "It wasn't just the sapphire. Edmund's greed destroyed Layla's family. Her father died in disgrace, her mother in poverty. Layla begged me to help restore their honor. When I learned Beatrice wore the sapphire so proudly, I couldn't bear it." Lady Beatrice's face paled, her voice a whisper. "I didn't know, Eleanor. Edmund told me it was a legitimate purchase. I wore it to honor him, not to mock anyone." Mrs. Price's eyes flashed. "Honor him, he was a thief. I planned to take the sapphire, return it to Layla's surviving kin. I used Victor's greed, Clara's bitterness, Reed's fit, all of them, to distract and deceive." Poirot's voice was gentle but firm, and the box in the stables with its fake gem. "A decoy to mislead Poirot, Nan." Mrs. Price nodded, a bitter smile curving her lips. "I knew you'd find it. The fake was to buy time, to make you think the sapphire was lost. I hid the real one in my room, in the vase, wrapped in silk too. Dull its shine." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes piercing. "But why the notes, madame? Why manipulate Reed, risk exposure?" Her gaze dropped, her voice softening. "Reed was a weak link. I knew he'd been in trouble before a petty theft. Years ago, I used anonymous notes to make him check the box, to draw suspicion to him. I thought it would keep you chasing shadows." Poirot's little grey cells hummed, piecing together the final details, and the voices by the window, heard by old Tom, you and Victor, arguing over the plan's risks. Mrs. Price sighed, her defiance ebbing. "Yes, Victor wanted more a cut of the sapphire's value. I promised him money to keep him quiet, but he grew reckless. Clara overheard us, and I used her loyalty to Beatrice to feed her half-truths, keeping her in the dark." Hastings, standing by the door, shook his head. "Blimey, you played them all like a fiddle, but you didn't count on Poirot." Mrs. Price's eyes met Poirot's, a flicker of respect in them. "I underestimated you, Monsieur Poirot. Your little grey cells saw through my game." Poirot bowed slightly, his voice calm but resolute. "The human heart, madame, it betrays itself in the smallest gestures. You sought justice, but chose vengeance. The sapphire is returned, and Layla's story is known. Let that be enough." Lady Beatrice rose, her eyes glistening. "Eleanor, I'll make amends to Layla's family, if any remain. I swear it, but you must face the law. Mrs. Price nodded, her shoulders sagging. I'm ready. I did it for Layla, but I see now. It was for me, too. Poirot signalled Grayson to escort Mrs. Price to her room, where she would await the authorities. As she left, Lady Beatrice approached Poirot, the sapphire glinting at her throat. Monsieur Poirot, you've given me more than my necklace. You've given me truth. Poirot bowed, his heart light with triumph. The truth, madame, is the jewel I seek. It shines brighter than any sapphire. As evening fell, Poirot and Hastings stood on the terrace, the manor's lights glowing against the dusk. Well, Poirot, Hastings said, you've cracked it. But that confession, Mrs. Price's story, it's a bit tragic, don't you think? Poirot's gaze was distant, his voice soft. Tragic, yes, but the heart's wounds drive many to crime. My little grey cells, they see the motive, the method, and now the confession. The puzzle is solved. The chapter closed with Poirot's quiet satisfaction, the star of azure restored, and Mrs. Price's motives laid bare. The case was nearly complete, with only Poirot's final reflections to seal its end. Chapter 14. The triumph of the grey cells. The evening settled over Ashford Manor like a velvet curtain. The sky, a deep indigo pricked with stars. Hercule Poirot sat alone in the quiet of his guest room, a small sanctuary of order amidst the chaos of the past days. A steaming cup of hot chocolate rested on the mahogany desk before him, its rich aroma mingling with the faint scent of beeswax from the polished wood. The case of the Star of Azure was solved. The sapphire necklace returned to Lady Beatrice Ashford. The thief, Mrs. Eleanor Price, unmasked, and her motives laid bare. Yet Poirot's little grey cells, ever restless, churned with reflections on the intricate dance of human nature that had unfolded. He opened his leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with meticulous notes. The talc-smudged glove, the silk scrap in the hedge, old Tom's overheard voices, the hidden passage, the Turkish scandal, the blue-painted crate, the cryptic notes, and Clara's reluctant confession. Each clue had been a thread in a tapestry of deception, woven by Mrs. Price's quest for vengeance over a decades-old wrong. Poirot's pen hovered over the final page, ready to inscribe his thoughts, not just on the case, but on the method that had led to its resolution. The Star of Azure, he mused, was more than a gem. It was a mirror reflecting the desires and wounds of those who coveted it. Charles Warwick's debts had made him a suspect, his nervous lies a distraction from his innocence. Clara Henshaw's resentment, born of her subservient role, had made her a pawn, her loyalty to Lady Beatrice twisted by Mrs. Price's manipulation. Victor Duval's greed, masked by artistic flair, had drawn him into the plot, his blue paint a careless signature. Thomas Reed, with his mysterious past and cryptic notes, had been a tool, coerced by fear. And Mrs. Price, driven by her cousin, Layla Demir's loss, had orchestrated it all, her elegance hiding a heart consumed by retribution. Poirot sipped his hot chocolate, its warmth grounding him as he reflected on his method. The little grey cells, he murmured, a faint smile curving his moustache. They see what the eye cannot. The glove, it whispered of care, the passage of secrecy, the voices of conspiracy. Each clue a note in a symphony, and Poirot, the conductor, he recalled the moment of unmasking in the drawing-room, the gasps as he revealed Mrs. Price's role, the sapphire's hiding place in her vase, and her confession of a vendetta rooted in Sir Edmund's greed. It was not just the recovery of the necklace that satisfied him, but the unveiling of truth, the human story behind the crime. Lady Beatrice's promise to make amends to the Demere family was a bomb, a step toward healing old wounds. Poirot's thoughts turned to his philosophy of detection. Observation, he knew, was the cornerstone. The flicker of an eye, the tremor of a hand, the pause in a voice, the reenactment, the masquerade, the planted clues, they were tools to provoke, to stir the guilty into betraying themselves. His little grey cells had woven logic from chaos, connecting the Turkish scandal to Mrs. Price's motive, the blue paint to Victor's complicity, and the notes to Reed's coercion. Each step had been a calculated move, guided by the principle that no one could hide from the truth forever. He set down his cup, his gaze drifting to the window where the Manners Gardens lay cloaked in moonlight. The case had been a challenge, not just of intellect but of empathy. Mrs. Price's vengeance, though misguided, was born of love for her cousina, reminder that even criminals were driven by human passions. Poirot's triumph was not in her downfall, but in restoring order, in giving Lady Beatrice the chance to right her husband's wrong. He closed his notebook, the final page inscribed with a single word, Feeney. The case was complete, its threads tied, its secrets laid bare. Yet, Poirot felt no urge to linger on his victory. Another puzzle, another mystery would surely call, but for now, he savoured the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. Captain Hastings knocked softly, poking his head in. "Poirot, old chap, fancy a nightcap. The house is buzzing with your triumph." Poirot's smile was warm, his voice soft. "Merci mon ami, but tonight I rest with my hot chocolate and my thoughts. The little grey cells, they have earned their peace." Hastings chuckled, retreating with a wave. "You're a marvel, Poirot. Don't stay up too late with those grey cells." Alone again, Poirot rose and stood by the window, the star of As image lingering in his mind, not its sparkle, but its weight, its power to stir hearts to crime. He adjusted his lapel, his reflection sharp in the glass, and murmured, "The truth, it is the greatest jewel. And Hercule Poirot, he always finds it." The chapter closed with the case sealed, the manor at rest, and Poirot's little grey cells glowing with the quiet triumph of a puzzle perfectly solved. No new mystery loomed. The story was complete, a testament to the power of observation, logic, and the indomitable human spirit.